Many years ago, Las Vegas tried to brand itself as a family-friendly vacation spot. And this was when MGM Grand actually had a theme park behind the casino. And every year for Halloween, they would turn it into a scream park. They would have like spooky mazes, spooky music, and they would hire a whole bunch of people to play extras, to play ghosts and ghouls, to just sort of wander around and try and scare people and just creep them out, basically. I was fortunate. For a couple of years, I got to play a sarcastic, homicidal clown. And I was one of the few people that got to talk back to the guests. That was fun. And people got scared. People would go up to me and say, "Go scare her. She doesn't like clowns." But one time, I went up and I scared someone. They turned around and threw their beer in my face. And another time, this teenage girl turned around, sort of pretended to scream, and then punched me in the face. Both times I notified management right away, and they got kicked out. And they had the same excuse. "But he scared me." And management would say, "Yes, that's what all the signs warning you about when you entered were all about. This is a scream park. You're going to be scared. That is no reason for you to assault anybody." We weren't allowed to touch anybody. They weren't either. I was grateful that management had that attitude. But it does lead into the topic of our video. What's your horror story as an amusement park employee? Story 1. My time to shine. I've got a lot of stories from my time as a ride operator. Some highlights. 1. On my way off my shift on a roller coaster, I hear that the car hit a duck at high speed. Apparently, the duck's entrails had become wrapped around a man's neck. He was fine, just deeply shaken, and the coaster had to be shut down for cleaning because blood and feathers were all over the car. 2. A young man vomited while the swing ride was going. Left a perfect circle of chicken parm all around the ride. 3. One time, a woman yelled at me for like 30 minutes straight because I wouldn't let her kids on the bucket ride. Nobody was allowed on any non-water ride if they weren't wearing a shirt and pants. Her daughters were running around the main area of the park in wet swimsuits, and she apparently didn't bring clothes for them for after they left the water park. 4. We were understaffed one day, and I was on my feet for 8 hours straight without so much as a bathroom break. Didn't matter how many times we called for someone to cover for me, no one was available. My supervisor tried to apologize to me on my way out, and I just snapped at him. My feet and arms hurt. It was a physically demanding ride, and I hadn't gotten to eat. I've many times considered calling OSHA about it, even years later. 5. Oh, and that same supervisor told all the ride operators that using the bathroom was a theft of time during a morning meeting. 6. A kid jumped off the swing ride as it was starting up. It was difficult to emergency stop because the operator had to literally step on a brake pedal. No one was hurt, but we were all peeved. 7. Let's end with a good one. I hated working coasters and the swing and bucket rides, but kiddie rides were always the best. There was a little girl who came through the line for the little swing over and over again. It was a slow day for those rides, and she was my only customer for like an hour or two. She only had one hand and had trouble getting onto the ride, so I lifted her up every time and helped her strap in. I've been told before that I wasn't supposed to do that, not allowed to touch the kids, but her mom was watching the whole time with a smile on her face, and it wasn't like I could just let the kid flounder on her own. My arms were so sore, but I could have helped that kid onto that ride as many times as she wanted. She leapt the little swings with the biggest smile when it was time for her to go. Oh, but don't worry. An hour later, she came back with her new friend. That's so cool. Those previous stories would have fit at a Halloween scream park. I mean, you got your blood and guts, quite literally. I'm glad he ended up on a very friendly note with that. It's great that that little kid really enjoyed that so much. So let's see what else we got going on here. Story 2. My horror story is one of my worst nightmares. I was working at a theme park geared towards kids, which I'll remain nameless as this happened in 2021. I was assigned to a play area in a new section of the park, and basically, I was just doing traffic control and trying to keep the play area from getting overloaded with kids. Not easy to do, and the parents could sometimes create more chaos. So anyway, about halfway, I think, memory on this is a little hazy, through my shift, as I had been there since just before opening, I hear a loud thunk. First thought through my head was, oh great, kid slipped and fell on something. A kid was coming down the stairs of the play area, and he's barely making any sound. Then he gets to the bottom of the stairs, and I take one look at his face, and I immediately know this is going to be worse than I expected. When he gets to the bottom of the stairs, spiral stairs too, the blood starts pouring from a nasty laceration just under his right eye. I immediately get in front of the kid so the other kids don't get too badly scarred for life and bring him over to his parents. And fortunately, I had a park-wide radio on me, and I checked with the parents of the injured child to make sure they wanted medical to attend. They agreed to have medical on the scene, and I immediately called over the operator channel requesting base contact medical and get them to the play area and describe what happened and why medical was needed. Plus who the injured party was. They got there in 4 minutes and began taking care of the child. And once that was done, calling for medical to attend, immediately closed down the play area. I was on autopilot while I was getting everything done. Didn't stop for a second to think about what I needed to do next. Just did it, and afterwards had a chat with management about the incident for the report. Never did find out how everything turned out with the kid, but this sticks with me to this day, and probably will for the rest of my life. I can still see his face when I close my eyes, and it haunts me. That is just tragic. We go through, it seems like every year, all these steps to try and make things safe for kids. It seems like all these playgrounds are continuously made out of more foam than metal, and yet kids will still find a way to get injured. I think kids can be chaos demons, just looking for danger. Either someone dares them to do something, or they'll figure out a way to do something that no adult ever intended that play device to be used for. Kids are very ingenious that way. Story 3. I got one. No gore, poop, or spicy time, but still scarred me. During my first job in high school, I worked at a lakeside water park as a janitor. After 2 months and getting to be friends with one of my supervisors, that very boss promoted me to supervisor as well, but without the pay raise. So he would have someone to cover for the 2 supervisors while they took a 3-day vacation. First day in the new role, the other supervisor, who hated me, was in charge of training me. He took 10 minutes to give me a rundown of the job, gave me his radio, had me assign everyone's workstations, then left without another word. My team was short-staffed that day. I had other attractions, snatching my limited crew to cover their short staff, and had 3 more of my crew leave due to heat stroke. The second day, around midday, a massive storm blew in. We had trees falling over, power got knocked out of the park for over an hour, and a tornado warning was called. Everyone stayed in the bathrooms for shelter. At some point during the storm, some of my crew decided to leave and go home. I had management screaming at me over the radio to stop them while I was trapped at the other end of the park in a bathroom along with about 100 other guests. The third day, the janitors who turned up realized who their supervisor was again. I was a scrawny 16-year-old guy, and 2/3 of the crew that day were 30+. They immediately realized I had no idea what I was doing and decided it would be an easy day. Such an easy day, they didn't do anything. Nothing was cleaned, and 2 guys even left work and returned when their shifts were over to clock out. I only knew that last part because it was brought up during the absolute fit tirade the park manager hurled at me after the park closed for being such an absolute failure at my job. No pay, no extra pay, no training, and they were supposed to get a handle on this? No. Did this person have any recourse to call anyone out? Did they all just think they could gang up on the underage person and just blame them for everything? That really sucks. Maybe they couldn't speak out. Maybe there was no one else that they could go up to or go over their heads to. And even if they could, hopefully he would have gotten believed, but maybe he believed that he wouldn't get believed. That sucks all around. I hope that doesn't go on his permanent record. I hope this person got to work wherever they wanted. Do you think that he worked at any other amusement parks after that? I don't think so. Story 4. Hearing these amusement park stories makes me remember a story. A friend of mine told me, and dear Lord, it's stuck in my head. And it just came back. Just a quick warning, it contains really detailed stuff. Oh, goody. So a good friend of mine who I knew for a while worked for Dorney Park. So he went to work there in the summer of 2012, and, well, he worked in the Wild Water Kingdom. Just went there. First generation of, those surfing machines came around, so everything was going well in the Water Kingdom area until somebody said Code Brown. And as soon as you hear Code Brown, the entirety of the water park is forcing to shut down, or at least that section. A kid at least around 6 to 7 years old did a number 2 in the wave pool, and that didn't stop there. He told me he thinks the same kid, and of course it was. I'm getting nauseous just thinking about it, dear Lord, but I must continue this. May cost me my lunch, but who cares? So some of the staff, after cleaning the wave pool, got another Code Brown, this time in the lazy river. My friend, who was now on high alert, was tracking down the family, found out the family, after the incident in the wave pool, rushed their kid to the lazy river to clean him. My friend was so furious, so disgusted, he just went to the staff room, took off his uniform, put on his normal clothes, then put a note on his locker stating in simple words, "Curse you all, I quit." Moral of the story, what my friend told me, keep an eye on your kids. I mean it. Keep an eye on them. If they've got to use the can, don't let them use the water area of the Godzilla theme park. Story 5. I'm only partway through these and feel compelled to share my somewhat minor horror story. I used to be a cast member at Walt Disney World in the Magic Kingdom. College internship. I was working the queue for the People Mover when 2 very large women roll up on ECVs, electronic conveyance vehicles, the motorized carts some people need for mobility. I only mention their size because it becomes important later. They ask me where the handicap entrance is. Of course, this happens to be one of the few rides that doesn't have one, and I explain this to them, offering my apologies and a no-strings card to let them go directly to the front of the line of any other attraction as compensation for their inconvenience. They began screaming and cursing at me and demanding my supervisor. So I call her out. She explains the same thing to them, and after I don't know how long, they finally take the free line cut and leave. This, however, is when the horror kicks in. As they're leaving, one of the women looks me dead in the eyes and deliberately runs over my foot with her ECV. It took all the willpower I had not to scream since I was on stage and didn't want to cause a scene. As soon as they were gone, I whispered to my supervisor what had happened and asked to go backstage to look at my foot. She said she'd watch my post for me. So I hustled to one of the backstage entrances, go downstairs, and as soon as I was out of hearing range of any guests, I let out the longest string of profanities I knew. Other cast members who had never heard me swear before were startled, and they helped me take off my shoe to assess the damage. My foot was all different shades of black and blue, given the weight that had rolled over it, but miraculously nothing was broken. I had a pretty bad limp for a while, though. Thankfully, it was the only time I was ever attacked by a guest.
Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 6. Patron, not employee, was at Six Flags Magic Mountain in 2018. I can't remember which ride we were about to get on, but it was a long walk up to it. After standing in line for a while, I started to feel a bit dizzy, but a bench to sit down was past a turnstile. I felt like I was about to pass out. We had walked a long way up, and I knew I wouldn't be able to walk down. I have epilepsy, and sometimes altitude can mess with me. The heat was as well, but mostly because I wasn't used to dry heat as I'm from a humid area. I asked to please sit down, and the girl working there said she couldn't let me back until the ride clears. I tried saying I just need to sit down. This isn't about the ride. She kept denying me. When the line moved a bit, she then smirked and said I can go. I took a step and passed out, landed straight on my chin. Blood splattered since the face bleeds so easily. I was out for a few minutes. When I came to, the poor girl was still crying and screaming, saying she was sorry. I wasn't upset with her at all whatsoever, a teenager just following the rules. Ended up having to get stitches as I had a hole in my chin the size of about a pencil. I hope she's okay. It's a funny story for me to tell now. This could have ended up being a righteous outburst from a customer. I think it's amazing that he had the attitude to just forgive this teenager, well, not get mad at her, because she probably had about as much training as that supervisor from the previous story. I know she was trying to follow the rules, but did she have the capability to call a manager about this situation? I'm glad there wasn't any permanent injury. Story 7. I didn't work there, but somewhere in my late teens, my family went to a water park. I'm 6 feet tall and built like a linebacker and have been since around 13 years old. I'm female, which is why this matters. We all decided to go on a water slide that involved going head first, riding down a foam mat. There were black strips at the bottom that were supposed to slow you to a stop before the concrete drained at the very end. Nobody told me that you had to press the mat down into these things for them to work, nor clearly had anyone thought of a person like me riding it. I shot down the slide super fast. The poor lifeguard girl, whose job was to order people to pass their mats to the next people in line, had her jaw hanging open as I shot past her and slammed chest first into the concrete drain at the end. I had so much adrenaline in my system that I was laughing and didn't feel it. The next day, I really felt it, as most of my chest and lower arms were extremely black and blue from bruising. I didn't break any ribs, and I also didn't go on that ride again. I stuck to the lazy river. Story 8. I worked at a theme park and have so many stories. One time, I was walking back to the front gates carrying all my work gear, and there's a massive green area where families hang out and picnic. A toddler there was annoying the local wildlife, chasing ducks and trying to kick them. His parents were laughing and encouraging him from quite a distance away. One duck panics and flees towards the water ride next door, taking off to the air when it hits the water. Kid chases it at high speed and runs straight under the safety barrier because he's so small. I was about 50 meters away, saw it about to happen, dumped all my gear on the ground, and ran. Kid hits the water like a Looney Tunes cartoon and seems to manage several steps on the water before sploosh and sinks. Parents panic and start to run, but they're too far away to really help. Still running, I dive onto my stomach, slide under the rail, and scoop up this tiny kid before the underwater mechanical track that carries the carts can drag him under and drown him. Kid was soaking wet and too stunned to scream. Parents were screaming at me as I handed their child back. I was just too numb to speak. Story 9. I've always been a big fan of water parks, and as a kid, the wave pools were my favorite. So, on a vacation to Disney, my family had to go to the water parks. Bit out of context. Mom isn't a swimmer, but Dad used to be a lifeguard, so he'd always get in the water with me, and Mom would watch us from the side. So I'm happy as heck. playing in the wave pool and swimming around underwater, being a mermaid, when I feel someone grab my waist. I figure it's my dad until I surface, and it's not my dad, but some random guy. Dad is quickly swimming over and asking why this guy has his hands on his daughter. I'm quickly released and pulled over to my dad, as the guy claims he thought I was drowning and was saving me. Okay, plausible, I guess, even though I'm a pretty strong swimmer. Dad still seems unhappy and decides to take me on some water slides instead. I thought nothing of it, but apparently after Dad got me away, Mom saw him doing the same thing to another kid and reported him to the Disney security. Guy got escorted out while I was having a ball with Dad, none the wiser for years. Ew. It all could have been just an accident, but it happened again. Nope. You don't even get 3 strikes, buddy. You're gonna get out. You're gonna get kicked out. Mickey Mouse and Chris Hansen are about to give you a talking to and perhaps even a beatdown. So, yeah. Story 10. I remember when I was 12, I was riding one of those swinging boat rides that had one swinging in the opposite direction next to the other until they both lingered upside down for around 10 seconds at the top. They both acted like a pendulum of sorts. I was smaller for a boy my age, maybe 5 foot 3 inches tall and 105 pounds, soaking wet. I was just barely large enough to ride this, and when I was at the top, I realized why. I almost slipped out of the retention bar across my seat, and the only way I could hold myself in place was hooking my knees as tightly as I could around the bar and hanging there. It also exerted more pressure to my crotch than I would have liked, but that's more favorable than potentially falling to my passing. No one noticed, and I didn't tell my parents. No real harm was done, but I've never gone on another ride like that since. Story 11. I worked Night of Joy, yearly Christian event at Magic Kingdom, and Grad Night, yearly event for high school seniors at Magic Kingdom for a few years. Late 80s, early 90s. Night of Joy has the highest incidence of kids found having spicy time pretty much wherever and substance use, while Grad Night had the highest incident of stupid behavior on rides, like trying to get out of them mid-ride. One kid got out of the Maglift ride, the one that goes around Tomorrowland, and got caught under a car, dragged for quite a while, absolutely skinning their leg, like one does to get a fur pelt. Another thing from that time that happened at the park was the abuse of the costume characters by the large Brazilian and South American tour groups. They kept in a pack, all wore the same color shirt, and followed a guide with the same color flag on a pole. They would swarm a character, pulling, punching, and pinching the character to get the character's attention. The characters would be a bruised mess after a single set. You know what? I believe it. I believe that for some reason, that's what a Christian kid's version of the Magic Kingdom is at that age. Little bit of freedom. I don't know what they were thinking. It's the Magic Kingdom, so we're under the protection of God and Mickey Mouse, so they won't mind. Story 12. The only story I have to share is as a patron. Water parks with multi-person rides that need weight balancing need to put up signs or tell riders to adjust or switch places before going down. I was with a big group of teenagers, an organized trip, and 6 or 8 guys and girls got on the giant round inner tube ride, myself included, but the guys were all on one side and the girls were on the other. I hate to admit that I was still borderline anorexic at the time, so I was 5'8", but only 120 pounds, and with the momentum from the weight of the guys, I got slung up to the crest of each corner, and my butt kept lifting off the tube, and the tube was lifting off of the slide as my body went past 180 degrees. It was absolutely terrifying. And for reference, yes, I had been on that ride multiple times before that as a less skinny person, or with better weight distribution, and never felt like I was in danger like that. That was absolutely terrifying. Story 13. My husband's first job was at the county fair. One of the rides he was put in charge of was a kids' play area, kind of like a bouncy house type thing. Despite a big sign at the entrance and him giving verbal warning, parents would encourage their kids to do backflips because they were so good at gymnastics class, despite being surrounded by other kids bouncing around. Luckily, no one got hurt, but my husband was always worried that if a kid got hurt, he would have been held liable. I told him he wouldn't be because he reminded the parents of the no backflips rule that was clearly stated on the sign, and the parents chose to ignore the rule by encouraging their child to break said rule. If someone got injured as a result, the budding gymnast parents would be liable. Story 14. I have a karma story. At Disneyland in California, before the California expansion, I barely remember, but remember thanks to someone in my family recording, a young kid, at least 3 years old, punched Launchpad McQuack right on the bill. He ended up hurting his hand and cried. Nothing else really came of it as far as I know. The person playing the character rolled with the punch, acting as if he was hurt. That kid would return to Disneyland years later and is the only one who likes the ride and song It's a Small World. I can't bother to spend any money on anything Disney-related now because of what they're supporting and promoting. Story 15. I want to tell a wholesome story to offset some of this horror. When I lived in my apartment, my neighbors were the sweetest couple in their mid-30s who met at age 18, when wife started her job at the same movie theater husband worked at. When he went to show her how the drink machine worked, I don't know what he did, but the whole thing collapsed and all however many gallons it held spilled all over her. He thought for sure she would quit right there and hate him forever. They got married 3 years later and had a miracle baby son. I miss them. Story 16. A young woman with some sort of special needs, never told exactly what, but was part of a group home visiting, was riding the Flume ride. This was a water ride where you sat in a hollow log and it ran along the track and didn't have any restraints. It would climb a decently tall hill and then would plummet down an incline and hit the water again. The young woman was riding and apparently got freaked out at the top where it pauses for a moment as it crests and jumped out. She landed on the concrete and tragically did not survive. Story 17. Forbidden Journey is a Harry Potter ride at all Universal parks. It loads via conveyor belt, so the ride never stops moving. The robotic arms these seats are attached to poke through the wall and you sit down traveling sideways. The secondary platform is the ADA platform that will then swap places with an arm when ready so the flow is not interrupted. Hippo is Flight of the Hippogriff, a small family coaster that complements Forbidden Journey. Universal is very serious about efficiency, especially with rides as popular as Harry Potter rides. Story 18. Went to a water park once. Went down a slide. It dumped me into a pool, and I had to get wheeled across the park on a backboard and neck brace. My mom was about to go down the same ride, but was told by one of the workers there that someone got injured. She then went to find me, not realizing I was the injured person. I never went back to that water park. And after a second embarrassing incident, I don't do water parks anymore.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.